me speak to this?
Please.
I mean, as the teacher on the panel, I feel like I have to say something about this. First of all, Mr. Canada, with all due respect, when they rescaled the scores, your English reading scores collapsed to 38% proficiency, which is about where my public school in East Harlem proficiency scores landed.
Let's say both schools, because my Promise Academy 1 had 60%, which is the same rates as white students in New York City. So if you're going to be accurate, let's be totally accurate. And our math scores were 80%, which was the same as white students.
Right.
So let's just be accurate if we're giving information.
Well, that's fantastic. Right? But listen, my frustration with the idea, and I watched Waiting for Superman yesterday. You would have to have a heart of coal to not be moved by the film. Who isn't going to be moved by the aspirations of children, especially if you care about education? But my frustration as an actual public school teacher in New York City is that every year without fail, I receive students from charter schools. The myth is that charter schools are taking kids who cannot be educated and breaking the contract, longer day, all this kind of stuff is working miracles with them. The reality is, in my experience, the best students from the public schools in search of something better, having received 12 glossy, high-color brochures in their mailbox, go to places like Harlem Children's Zone, Harlem Success Academy, and it's the ones who have the most difficult time, the ones with learning disabilities, the ones who are English language learners who wind up right back in my classroom. So they win the lottery and then they lose it. Are they waiting for Batman? I mean, really.
Let me ask you one question about that. First, when you and I were talking about this when we first met, I asked you if you thought the teachers should be compensated based on their performance. And
I think it's outrageous. It's an insult. It's an insult to teachers that we don't care about our students unless you dangle $5,000 or $10,000 in front of our face. Vanderbilt just did a study, and they expected to measure what the incentive would be. They found zero. So there's no evidence for this. But there's a kind of free market bias that what's good for you, the free market, we need to bring that into education. Those great ideas that wrecked the housing economy, that wrecked the economy, are now what we want to bring to education.
So, Randy,
it doesn't work.
By the way, if he's right, why are you supporting all this stuff about compensating teachers based on effectiveness?
What we are actually supporting is, and I would say this to Jeff's point and to Brian's point, and we've seen this in a bunch of contracts we've negotiated. What we're supporting is a template that says, let's do right now what's good for kids and fair for teachers.
No, come on, let's
wait.
Please.
No, because
I've heard that 18 times in the last 24 hours. It's making me crazy.
But the difference is, in lots of different places, the way you measure that is by what people actually negotiate. So, for example, in New York City, we did negotiate a longer school year. We changed and a longer school day. We changed
that's how
the
it
day.
got to be 183 days.
We changed the day, the longer day. It's about a 7-hour day. We changed it 8 times because the first iteration that then Chancellor Levy and I wanted to do, which is off of what happened in the Chancellor's District, was to do half of it for small group instruction for kids who were falling behind, aligned to the school day, and for professional development for what teachers needed so that there would be job-embedded professional development.
I don't want to interrupt you, but you told me you didn't want to talk that long anyway, so I will interrupt you.
So
the question on the table is compensating teachers based on performance.
So
your constituent, your member, doesn't like that you're doing that. What would you tell them about that?
My point is, we ended up, the teachers who, every single teacher in the system was working longer time and got paid proportionately more. But it was a contract that people debated and embraced. The same is true in terms of the school-based bonuses. We didn't know if the school-based bonuses that Klein and I negotiated would work or wouldn't work. But we said, let's marry the concept of collaboration as well as some bonuses.
School-based bonuses are not individual-based bonuses.
Except so, we said, let's marry the concept and see if it will work. And ultimately, the schools that had it liked it, and we think that they got along better and there was more collaboration. But, as Brian just said, in the study of it, just like in the Nashville study, it found no evidence that it worked.
Can I just
so
say, but
my
this is what I would say.
But my point is, you look to
Randy,
try and do. You look and do some experiments and see where the evidence takes you.
But Randy, why don't, if you don't want your bonus, give it back. Let people decide for themselves if they want to get the bonus. Why can't we at least have the option
I'll tell you
for
why.
those folk who want to take the bonus to take the bonus,
I'll tell you
and
why.
those people who want to give their bonus to charity, let them give the bonus to charity.
I'll tell you exactly why. Because Waiting for Superman laments that the country's getting dumber. But when you increase, we already have high-stakes tests that test a very narrow band. I'm sorry if I'm getting heated. I taught all day.
What if it was a bonus just based on observations, not on tests? A bonus, but let's
just on the
for a
supervisor.
No,
Yeah, just on your supervisor.
Is there any way you can
then the
gauge
squeaky wheels, the ones who want to advocate for their kids won't get the bonus?
So there's no way to gauge teacher quality at all?
No, of course there's a way. But think about your
be?
best teachers. Think about your best teachers.
What would that way be?
I think it's got to be more holistic. It's got to involve peer evaluation. It's got to involve the voice of parents. I think students should have a voice in teacher evaluation. What the students think of a teacher should matter.
But if you got there, you'd agree that some teachers teaching the same thing should be paid more than other teachers teaching the same thing.
I really don't think that's healthy to the culture.
Okay, so it doesn't matter how you define quality because you don't. Because you're not going to do anything with it anyway.
There's a big difference
what do you mean?
between
I don't understand what you're saying.
Pay and evaluation. Why don't we go to evaluation first, and then we talk about pay?
Okay, before we do that,
but why don't
let me ask Dennis
Brian
a question. Let me ask Dennis a question.
He actually thinks is needed to improve his school.
Right.
Why don't you actually ask that question?
Great.
Because what he said as a school teacher, regardless of what we try to negotiate, to try to see if some of this experimentation and innovation works. That's what some of us are trying to do. But we have teachers in this room.
That's a good idea.
Ask them what they need in order to help improve teaching and learning so that all kids can achieve. Ask them.
That's a good idea. Let's start this way. How many times in a given 1 month period would you say you're observed by an assistant principal and given feedback
Why don't
on
you
how
ask
Why
them
don't you
what
let
they
me
need?
ask the question?
Rather than asking them.
Brian, how many times would you say you're observed? How many times would you say you're observed by your assistant principal?
It depends on the month. It depends on what we're doing.
How many times since the year started this year?
My principal came in just the first week of school. She came into my classroom. Yeah.
Once. Okay, Jessica, can you